One of the common questions I get from my students is, Mosh, how do I get started? I've got this project, I don't know what is the first step. I don't know what to do next. So in this lecture, I'm going to show you a systematic approach to build software. Every software application starts with the requirements document. Now this requirements document can be one page, it can be 500 pages, or it can be just a verbal discussion between a few people. Irrespective of how big this requirements document is, your first task is to extract the use cases in this application. Use cases are the actions that the user can perform. Here are some examples. The user should be able to create vehicles, update vehicles, view vehicles, sort them, filter them, upload photos, and so on. Just write this down on a piece of paper. Keep it very simple. Now, once you have these use cases, you need to find their dependency. So we can start anywhere in the list, let's say filter vehicles. In order for us to build this feature, first we need a list of vehicles. And in order to build this vehicle list, first we should be able to create vehicles. So we can store them in a database, and then we can view them in a list. So here's the order to implement these use cases. We're going to start with creating a vehicle first. Once we deliver that function, then we move on to the second step, the second task, which is listing the vehicles, and finally, the third task, filtering vehicles. Now, what is critical for you to understand here is that when you're building the list of vehicles, you should not worry about all the other fancy features like filtering, sorting, pagination, and so on. This is a mistake that a lot of junior developers make. They try to do so many things at once, and that's why they get lost in detail and deliver poor quality software. So focus entirely on building a list of vehicles, and that list doesn't even have to be fancy. Render the vehicles in a very simple list. Once it's working, then you can make it look better. You can apply some styles, you can add icons, and so on. Once you deliver that feature, then move on to the third step, filtering vehicles. At this point, you should isolate your mind and you shouldn't think about anything else. Like this is the only and the last feature of this application you need to build. So, in our current dependency graph, we're going to start with create vehicles use case. Now, for this use case, what I do is to sketch a simple form. So earlier in the requirements, I told you about the attributes of the vehicles we need to store. So every vehicle should have a make and model and a few other attributes. So here in our form, we need a drop-down list for the vehicle make. Once the user selects a value from this drop-down list, then the model drop-down list should be repopulated because models are based on the makes. Now, what is important here is that the items in these two drop-down lists come from the server. Because in our application, somewhere in our database, we need to register all the standard makes and models. Now, similarly, we need a list of features that are available in this vehicle. So here we need a checkbox list, and the items in this list are rendered dynamically. So, again, we need to store the list of standard features in our database. And this data should come from the server. So back to our dependency graph, we want to build this feature, create vehicle. In order to build this, first we need an Angular form. Now this form needs its data from the server. So in order to build this form, first we need an API. We need one or more API endpoints so we can get the data to populate this form. Next, in order to build this API, we need a database to store our data. But how do we create our database? We're going to use Entity Framework Code First Migrations. So, first we create our domain model and then use Code First Migrations to generate or update our database. So, this is the approach that I always follow in every project. Now, we want to reduce the scope here. We want to focus on a small piece of functionality. So first, we want to build this API. And that's your first challenge. So over this week, I want you to build these two API endpoints to get the list of vehicles makes and their models, as well as their features. So everything you learn in ASP.NET MVC5 to build APIs applies in ASP.NET Core as well. There are some subtle differences, so I have attached a PDF for you to this lecture, where you can find all the necessary information about transitioning from ASP.NET MVC5 to ASP.NET Core for the purpose of this exercise. Sometime next week, I'm going to publish my solution, so you can see how I will go ahead and build this feature step by step. So go ahead, get started, and I will see you next week.